Welcome to another episode of Preparing for the Unexpected. I'm your host, Alex Folick, and as always, we like to talk about things related to crises, COVID, business continuity, resilience, anything that helps you, your organization, or your community prepare for, respond to, and overcome adverse situations. If you'd like to be a guest on the show, please feel free. You can find me on LinkedIn. I'm the only Alex Folick there. I'm really easy to find, and I do respond to everything I get. It is that time again. We will be having a great conversation about 2023 and the summer of crises we're having with Regina Phelps. Regina, welcome back.
Alex, it's so good to be here. And my goodness, could it get more interesting in our lives?
Oh, I know there's so much going on in the world right now that businesses and communities, countries, individuals need to focus on. Really pay attention
to. It's quite remarkable. And actually, Canada is one of the places that is in the news right now, more than anybody else, it seems. Well, okay, I think Russia might have beat you out lately, but
yeah,
it is. Yeah, right. Well, we'll talk about that later. But the idea that every day for weeks now, Canada has really been in the news, and it's been really fascinating to see how all of a sudden people have woke up to go like, oh my gosh, Canada has crises, and oh my gosh, they have wildfires too. And you have wildfires actually every year, but for some reason this year with climate change has been one that has attracted the attention of the East Coast, primarily because they could not see across the street. So that was fascinating. I'd love to hear what's going on right now in your world, because apparently, at least in the United States, they think it's over because the sky seems to be clear.
No, it's not over at all.
Yeah.
It has been absolutely terrible here in Canada, right across the country. We have 10 provinces and 3 territories, and all but 2 have forest fire issues right now. It is nonstop, and we haven't even hit July and August and into September, where the real fire season is.
Wow.
It started this year in March and hasn't stopped. And I knew what we were going to be talking about today, so I actually went and did a little bit of search on a few things.
Have you had drought as well? I mean, obviously you must have had drought to have this kind of severe weather conditions already. And I guess we've been so obsessed with our own drought in the West, in the United States. I'm sorry, we haven't thought about you having one, but obviously that's the case. And so the fact that it started in March is shocking.
Yeah, February turned out to be, at least where I am, for sure, the hottest February ever.
Wow.
And a lot of places didn't get the snow that they normally get. Some got, an unbelievable amount, but still it wasn't the yearly average, spaced out over time. We get one big dumping, but then it's all gone. We had days touching 30 degrees where I am in April. And that never happens, ever.
Wow.
But yet we were having that. And that's happening in so many different places. Listen to as of June 21st, we have 2,765 active fires on the go. And they're not little tiny ones.
No.
Big ones. 17 million acres. Actually, and the number is probably higher since this is the 21st, have burned. We've had pushing 130,000 people having to be evacuated. Now, this is Canada.
Right.
Right. We don't.
So that's 130,000 is a huge number.
Yeah. California has more people than our entire country.
Right.
So 130,000 people up here is a lot.
Right.
That's happening. And a big chunk of it is from lightning strikes because of the storms hitting the dry bush, lightning strikes, starting all these fires. I know social media will have it that it's arson, but no, it's not. Most of it is sparks from trains going through dry areas.
Oh, right.
The lightning strikes. Yes, people will sometimes not put out their campfires properly, but the majority is happening through lightning strikes, and it's continuing because we're warmer. Our fire season now on average is 2 weeks longer than it was a couple of years ago. But this year, before, hopefully I remember this right, in May, they said it was already the worst fire season we'd ever had in this country.
In May?
In May.
Oh my God.
So,
And you still have till the fall.
and we still have to the fall to go. And some of the fires have beat out, Fort McMurray. If anyone remembers that disaster a couple of years ago, just horrendous up there. We've had worse situations now.
Wow.
Unbelievable.
I've actually read that some European firefighters that have been coming to work in Canada for you, and you've gotten quite a few people from all over the world, that many of them have been really, I will use the word confused, because their job in their countries is to put the fire out. And the job in Canada, because you have such an expanse of woods, is to basically make sure it doesn't burn anything, but basically keep directing it away from actual cities or villages or things like that. And so they're like, how to fight a fire when you're not really putting it out, you're just kind of redirecting it.
Yeah. It's and we don't do very much of controlled burns, because the controlled burns actually tend to be on the land of the indigenous people. And so if we do controlled burns, we're destroying their livelihoods at the same time. And they do a lot of that. So they can't do, they don't want to give permission to do controlled burns, because then what? Then we've got another disaster on our hand.
Right.
So there's a bit of a chaos here. And to your point, the confusion, Canada doesn't have a national forest fire group, or whatever you would call it, ministry.
Fire brigade.
Yeah, a national approach to it. Each province has its own approach, and they take care of it. Unfortunately, what happens is when one province has a greater impact, let's say British Columbia, and Ontario and Quebec and other places will send their spare, I guess you could say, firefighters to help BC. And then when BC's under control, they'll go somewhere else, or back to their home provinces and deal with what's happening in Ontario. But now,
what happens when it's all on fire?
And that's what's happening now. We're
Right.
all on fire.
Right.
So the government has already said, okay, we have to stop this individual province approach. We have to come up with something else. This has to change. So that's a good thing. I just wish it was already in place, because there's so many people that are being impacted. And yeah, you mentioned the smoke. It's even impacted me here. I know, a big part of it has been the East Coast of the US, New York and Boston. They're all, I've seen the headlines, blame Canada, and it's all our fault, and even a conspiracy theory that we were doing it on purpose. Saw that one.
Oh God.
But we've had, with the way that the wind patterns have been going and the way the climate has been changing, the winds have been going in different directions. So in just a few weeks ago, when New York and Boston were experiencing that orange thick smoke, you couldn't go outside. We had that here where I live too. And if you're going outside, you had to wear a mask. Everyone's doors and windows, we were closed. Schools canceled all outdoor activities. And anything that was outdoors was shut down.
Oh, extremely dangerous to be outside when you have that kind of particulate matter, the 2.5 micron. I mean, that's deadly. Yeah.
So that's where things are here. It's still going on, and we still have more to go, which is the sad part.
Yeah. I've been thinking about it a lot, because I'm not only because I have a lot of dear friends in Canada like you, but I also am a big bird watcher. And of course, now there's tons of birds that are supposed to be nesting happily in Canada, having their babies. And now, of course, that's all been disrupted. And so there's a huge sort of shift environmentally going on in the bird population, because they're trying to find a safe place to be, which is kind of interesting. And really, again, sort of driven by this issue of climate change. And it's really disconcerting. But I think the thing that it allows us to also look at from a perspective of this crisis is that wildfires in particular, many businesses think that they will never really ever be affected by a wildfire. But we know certainly in California and in the western parts of the United States, this has been going on for a long time.
Mhm.
And so it's important that people stop and think about this. And even when my clients in the East Coast kept saying like, oh my God, now I understand what you're going through in California. And it was like, well, weren't you paying any attention before? But now
Yeah.
they all of a sudden went like, oh my gosh. But then this makes everybody need to think about their continuity plans in relationship to wildfires. And I think many people used to never think that they would ever have to be thinking about this. And let me just sort of point out a few things that I think is really important. I have a list that I go through with my clients that I think it's important that we think about. First of all, in the United States, and I believe in Canada as well, employers must provide employees with a safe work environment. That's kind of a standard labor practice.
Yeah.
And so just think about that with wildfires. That means that in the case of wildfires, if people can work from home, they probably should be working from home because there's no reason for them to jump in their car and drive to an office. I mean, that's just crazy for those people that have actually gone back to really working in an office. The other thing too is that think about, this is going to sound like COVID, but if people are at work, you need to think about your ventilation system. And remember back in the early days of COVID, we talked about this ad nauseum about you need to have a good ventilation system. You need to have a good HEPA filter. You need to make sure that at least it's rated at a 13, so it will pick up all these particulate matter, just like wildfire smoke, 2.5 microns. And so I think this is important also that people think about, gee, I now live in a place where wildfire smoke could be an issue. So what about ventilation? What about filtration? What about those masks that we bought lots of people? It's maybe they want to keep some of those.
Yeah,
in their
I saw a lot more people walking around wearing masks.
Right. It's so funny. That's absolutely true, right? The fact that people haven't worn a mask for COVID in a long time, but all of a sudden masks appeared everywhere. And they weren't just wearing, surgical masks would do nothing in a wildfire. They were wearing the real thing, N95s. It's like, wow. So I think it gives us an opportunity to reflect. If you're any place where you think you might be exposed to wildfires, let's see, New York City, that now you have to really rethink this, right? And I think that that's an important thing. So what I would say to my clients, and I have a list of I think about 5 or 6 things. I always say the first thing you have to do is you want to make sure that you've reviewed your emergency plans. If you're in a place, and I'll give you a good example, data centers. We have a lot of clients who are data centers, and they're all over the place, all over the United States, all over the world. If you think you have any possibilities of exposure to fire smoke, you need to update your emergency plan. Make sure you've really thought through the basics, right? And that it's not just a check the box thing. You've actually thought through what you would do if there was a fire and how you would keep aware of where it's at, where it's going, what's happening with the wind, all of those things that a lot of people, frankly, never think about. And so that's really important. The other thing would be if you're in any business, but in particular, if you have any kind of technology, is really looking at what your power down procedures would be. Now, you may say, well, Regina, data center is not going to shut down. And I'll say, well, if a fire is not very far from them, they'd better shut down. And so, how would they go about shutting down? And again, many of my clients may be in Amazon locations. They might be in a variety of Microsoft cloud places. Clouds still live on the ground somewhere. So I think it's important that you understand where your technology, first of all, is. And secondarily, do they have a process about how to manage that? And it's a great opportunity to ask that question when you're signing contracts with people about what is your power down? How are you procedures? How are you assessing your risks, such as wildfires? How would you manage if there was a smoke related issue, i.e. New York City? That's just common sense. And now people, I think, really see it's not just California, it's basically anywhere. And it doesn't have to be a smoke at a forest of yours. It could be your next door neighbor, right? Another thing is also looking at things like making sure that if you are in a wildfire area, that you've really looked at all of your emergency lighting. If you lose power, you would have battery backups so that you could actually, if you had to do any evacuations or things like that. Because as you probably, and I don't think you've experienced this so much in Canada, but certainly in California, when they've done wildfire shutdowns, they don't shut down just a little area of electricity. They shut down quite a large swath of electricity. And so you may not even be near where the fire is, but your region, your high voltage systems in that area could have been shut down. And so that means you need emergency lighting that's battery backup and, those kinds of things, which again, people, except probably folks like us, think about. Look at the kind of things that you have in place that might be. So some of my clients, for example, are in laboratories and they have things like dry ice and things like that. If indeed they lost power, what kind of situations do they have to prevent things from perishing, like blood or samples they've collected. So, if you're in an industry where there might be those kinds of concerns, how do you protect vulnerable or perishable products or things that you have?
Yeah, it would be terrible for something to happen and medicines or something like that are destroyed.
Right. Pharmacies, medical facilities, laboratories, but then also food supplies. I mean, it's the same kind of thing, right? It's like rethinking everything. And then also, I think it's important that they really think about issues such as really making sure they have effective security measures, because if they do have to power down, if they lose all of their power, people might be concerned about things such as either theft or looting or things like that could go on. So, what about windows? What about alarm systems? What about cameras? Are they all on battery backups? Blah, 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 blah. In some areas, another one of my things that I ask my clients to do that are in fire-prone areas is that, is there a way that you can get at least assistance from law enforcement to either make sure that they do a drive-by of your facility to be able to report status? And in some smaller communities in particular, they'll do that. And so many, again, data centers, I think throughout the middle part of the United States, that they should really work with law enforcement to make sure that they are able to say, hey, if you don't go out of the way, but if you're cruising by, please just drive through my parking lot and make sure things look okay. Yeah. It's important. And a couple more that I ask people do is that they should think about establishing a fire watch. So I have several clients who are big data centers, and they never thought about this before, but they're actually, one of them was in San Diego, which has had tons of fires. And they would actually keep trying to keep it running as long as they could. And I'd say, well, I hope you have a fire watch. And they looked at me like, what the heck is a fire watch? And it is a live, living person who basically walks around the building, interior and exterior, who's doing nothing but looking for signs of fire. So sounds like, why would I need that when I have cameras and stuff? It's because they might notice something that a camera's not going to see before a spike really ensues. So
smoke.
Right. Yeah. As a human person is going to be more effective in a fire watch than any camera system that you have. And if you're in a place like that where you are really prone and where there are things potentially around you at close proximity, you should be thinking about that. And then you also want to be thinking about other ways that you might options for reporting fires, because a lot of people say, well, if there's a fire in my building, the alarm system will go off and automatically it's going to dispatch to my fire alarm monitoring company. But that's a lot of assumptions when wires might be damaged. Fires might have actually damaged some of your equipment already, not immediately around your facility, but a distance away from you. So you need to think about what are the other ways that you would report a fire. And it may be that you're just, relying on, even some of my clients will even use, the walkie-talkies with local fire departments. They'll even use CB radios. They'll use different types of old-fashioned equipment that works when other things don't work.
I remember working closely with a facilities manager a few years back, and as we were doing disaster recovery and business continuity and things like that, and we were having a chat, and he was showing me some of the things he had set up, and he had a wall of 6 or 7 walkie-talkies, all numbered, all identified, who they belong to, what they were for, and everything. He goes, so if anything happens, I just pick this up
Right.
and
Right.
I hand out the walkie-talkies to the incident manager. He would have one. He goes, just in case, because we're all going to be exiting the building at different spots. So
Right.
instantly we can get a hold of each other and
Right.
report things. So
Two-way radios, I have to tell you, are still, for many organizations that have a physical presence, a physical plant, are still really, really important. I recently was doing a large job for a big developer in the Bay Area, and they had just gotten rid of all their two-way radios, and they were so happy. And I just said to them, that was the biggest mistake you've ever made. And they said to me, why? We all have cell phones. It's like, well, yeah, so does the world have cell phones. And mobile phones are only designed to actually accommodate between 2 and 5% of the people that are in a region picking up a phone at any given time. And after that, you get a fast busy or you get nothing. And so if you really want to try and communicate with people in an area, having two-way radios is like the best, and especially in a large plant. So tell people don't get rid of your two-way radios. Keep them in good working condition. They're going to save your butt someday when everything else fails. So they're really, really, really important.
It's kind of that mentality of reliance on technology. Technology will save us, but you can't assume that it'll even be there. So you do have to keep some of those old things, like an old rotary phone somewhere.
That's right. Right. Yeah, it's amazing. But yes. And so I think those are important things. And I think it's good that you just periodically remind people, and it should be like on a checklist, whether you're in a fire area or not. But if you have two-way radios now in any of your office buildings, any of your locations, that would be one thing I just want to make sure. And I would give that sort of pitch every time I had the opportunity to talk about what are your emergency communication strategies. Let's talk about those. Oh, I love your two-way radios. and remind them why you love them.
I'd like to add something to your list.
Yeah.
Before we take a break in a minute or two, is knowing where some of your employees are as well.
Very important.
Because now that after COVID, we've got a lot of remote workers. So some of these people are going to be considered, quote unquote, critical workers or, key subject matter experts.
Yep.
If they lived in Northwestern Ontario, up where my family lives, then they're close to forest fires. Yep. They may not be available. And now you've lost your subject matter expert, and you have an issue in your office, or you need something done that can't be addressed.
Totally. So, before we take a break, I want to give one more, and then and then I'm done with my fire suggestions. The last one really is to make sure that people do periodic inspections around their facility for any fire hazards. I know that people might say, well, that's not a business continuity job. It's really a facilities job. And that's true. However, if indeed there's a fire, it becomes everybody's problem. So looking at safety hazards, fire hazards, things that are flammable, gutters that aren't cleaned out, all of that stuff, I know sounds like a home checklist, but in reality, it's kind of the same thing. If you're not doing good fire prevention around the periphery and fires do come nearby, or even sparks that can actually fly, in some cases, miles, that's the last thing you need, because that could be something that ignites your building when nothing else has.
Yep. And that's true, because I used to be on a health and safety committee, and in Ontario, for certain size businesses or facilities, it's the law. You have to do an inspection.
Right.
And I can't remember if it's every month or every 2 months. Someone can email me if I get it wrong, but you had to do that, and you had to pick a spot, and you had to look for those different things. You had a big list that you went through and you checked to make sure. And fire hazards was one of the items on that list. And I was a member, and I used to do these inspections, and I was a part of business continuity. So part of the networking, working together, and then we'd hand that to facilities, and facilities would address, like, hey, so-and-so piled up a whole bunch of cardboard boxes, where they shouldn't be, type thing. So.
And you know why that's also, I think, important is I think I read one time that there was some study that if you, like, say, if it's a scratch on your wall at home, you walk by it once and you go, oh, I got to repaint that. You walk by it the second time, Oh, yeah. Third time, you don't even see it anymore. And that's the same for many things that we're talking about now, is that you see it often enough, it doesn't even register anymore to you that it's important and you should do something about it. So
Yeah.
that's why it's good for facilities to have other people's eyeballs on things so that things get resolved.
Yeah. And on that note, we're going to take a break. We're talking with Regina Phelps today about 2023, the summer of crises. We'll be right back. If you like that video, thumbs up. If you didn't like that video, thumbs down. But leave me a message and let me know your thoughts. Of course, don't forget to subscribe. And in the meantime, stay prepared, everybody.